A younger friend of mine asked me a question recently, and I thought it would be good to talk about that question here on today's video. The question was simple. Now that the economy seems to be shifting and the Fed has cut rates, and we expect for interest rates on home mortgages to continue coming down slightly over the next number of months, should I start to consider the option of buying a home right now? And of course, the answer to this question is very nuanced. It has so much to do with your personal situation, the circumstances that you find yourself in, the goals that you have in life, and the reasons that you have for buying a home. And so today, I want to focus this video on some unconventional wisdom. I want to talk about 5 reasons you should not consider buying a home right now. Now, in future videos, we'll also cover the flip side of this issue. I personally am a huge advocate of real estate. I've owned a number of homes throughout my life. I plan to continue buying real estate, and I have lots of compelling reasons to go into real estate if that's something that appeals to you. But I think it's really important today to have a conversation about all the compelling reasons you should consider not buying a home. There are many reasons to avoid buying a home. I'm just going to talk about my 5 reasons today, and hopefully that helps you start to consider other options and alternatives. Now, before we get into the video today, I want to take a moment to ask you to please subscribe to the channel. We're a new channel. I'm putting out videos every week, but I would really appreciate your support. So if you're enjoying this content at all, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and engage as you'd like in the comments below. Let's dive right into the very first reason why you should not buy a house. This reason is the immense financial commitment that comes with home ownership. Now, let's start with your upfront costs. To get into a home, you need to bring a down payment on that home. This down payment is typically 20% of the purchase price. There are different variations on a down payment. In particular, if you have a special type of loan option, but in general, you want to consider having at least 20% down. I personally advocate for more money down, 20% at a minimum. This is for a couple of reasons. One, you have to show discipline enough to save up that 20%. If you have that 20% available and it's dedicated toward buying a home, that means you're more likely prepared for that kind of a decision. If you don't have the money and you don't have a way of creating a down payment, I think that should be a very good sign that you're not ready to move forward with purchasing a home. There are other costs associated with home ownership. There's a lot of upfront expenditure to close a loan, to do inspections, to make sure the property is right for you. And so this financial commitment is one that you make for the life of the loan that you take out against the property. It is your responsibility at that point once that loan closes and the home becomes yours. This commitment can stretch 30 years in most cases when you take out a 30-year mortgage. Be aware that this financial burden is significant. There are also other considerations. You'll need to add homeowner's insurance. You'll need to consider the mortgage payment that you have. You'll need to consider property taxes that you have. You'll need to consider any other fees that you expect monthly. A lot of people do calculate these expenditures and come to a monthly payment based upon the loan that they've taken out, the interest rate that they have, the expected property taxes that you might have. These are all numbers you can calculate before purchasing a home fairly easily. Just go to the county website where you're buying a home, make sure you do some property tax evaluation, and come to that monthly expense that you know to expect. Here's the thing. That monthly expenditure is just your bare minimum. That's what you're going to pay every single month as a minimum. So with that being your minimum monthly payment, let's jump into our second reason. That reason includes hidden costs and maintenance of the home. Now, these are 2 separate issues. Typically, I bundle them together because oftentimes hidden costs are associated with maintenance, but they are two issues, so let's treat them separately here. First, you need to make sure that the yard work and upkeep on your home is done on a monthly basis. In some cases, items require annual maintenance. In some cases, items require monthly maintenance. It varies widely, so you need to understand the systems that you have in your home, like your HVAC system, your plumbing system, and then your yard and the maintenance associated with that yard, any sprinkler systems or drip systems that you have. All of these things need to be maintained. You can't just let them go. Not only does this take a tremendous amount of time and effort that you likely aren't thinking about unless you've owned a home, it also can take a lot of money to keep these things going, especially if you want to hire someone to do these jobs for you. It's going to be tremendously expensive. So be sure to think through those additional monthly costs that come with maintenance. On top of that, with hidden costs, there are other things that you're likely not thinking about. A home has all sorts of features, to include a roof, to include windows, to include a siding material, which may be stucco or wood, depending on where you live. All of these things have a certain life expectancy. And so before you consider buying a home, make sure you understand how old those items are and when you can plan to replace those items. If you haven't looked at the age and condition of those items, it's a very important part of the process. When one of these things goes bad, you can spend upwards of $30,000 replacing a system. I recently had to completely redo my entire HVAC system in the property I own today. This was a very expensive endeavor. It actually exceeded $35,000 given the size of the property. I was expecting this cost, so it wasn't a tremendous hit on my budget, but had I not been thinking through what to expect, this would have been hard to bear. Please think about all of the potential hidden costs. Now, just by its nature, the word hidden implies that some of these things are unexpected or things you wouldn't think about. There can be all sorts of issues with a home. There can be damage that occurs from storms. You can have a burglary that results in some damage. During COVID, I think a lot of homeowners were experiencing tremendous gains in their property insurance. This continues to this day. Depending on where you live, this can be a very important and pivotal point that you want to pay attention to. Let's jump into the third reason to consider not buying a home. Market uncertainty. Real estate markets are very different depending on where you're located. We see a lot of news on national trends relative to real estate markets, but these trends are not always applicable in your local area. You need to take some time to understand the trends in your local area. You need to understand specifically what the supply looks like currently on the real estate side, what the demand looks like on the real estate side. These two factors are very important in determining the price trajectory of home ownership. Prices tend to go up when there's a lower supply and higher demand. When there's less demand, homes can sit on the market at higher prices until they're dropped, they do not sell. We've been experiencing more of that lately, although in some places a constrained supply still exists. In large part, a lot of homes are sitting on the market longer due to higher prices, people not being able to afford those prices, meaning that the demand has gone down tremendously and people are not out purchasing those homes. In addition, markets shift over time. It's almost impossible to predict how the real estate market will shift. There are a couple of pointers to keep in mind. The real estate market tends to be much slower than what you see with the stock market and other economic news. So in general, you'll expect a number of months of delay in the real estate market for information and circumstances within the economy to percolate down into the real estate market. These shifts are gradual, they're slow, and they're hard to predict in lots of cases. Nonetheless, when you buy a home, you should be buying it for reasons that support having a home, not necessarily for investments. So again, the basic point here is that markets go up and markets go down. And although the real estate markets tend to move more slowly than other markets, they still can be quite volatile. You can find yourself, if you buy at a high point in the market, just a number of years later in a low point in the market where your home is not worth as much as you paid for the home the 3 years prior. Now, this circumstance isn't necessarily an issue if you plan to continue living in the home and you can continue to make your payments. But if you can't for some reason, or if your life circumstances shift, you'll need to get out of that home. Finding yourself underwater, financially speaking, on a home can be a very negative experience. And that brings me to reason number 4. When you own a home, you have a complete lack of flexibility. You're locked into a particular home in a particular location, and you don't have a lot of quick ways out of that situation. In addition to this, a number of people experience lifestyle changes, and these changes can be sudden and unexpected. A job that you have might be lost. You might decide that you need to move back home to be closer to your aging parents. There are all sorts of reasons that you might change the way that you want to live. When you're locked into a home, you are stuck until you can figure out a way out of that home. So again, reference the market volatility that we discussed in an earlier point. If you can't get out of a home at a particular time and you need to make a lifestyle change, then you have a challenging set of circumstances to consider. Another common reason that homes are sold has to do with divorce. If you do find yourself in a situation where you need to get a divorce from a partner, that home can no longer be shared in the same way. And so you'll either have to stay in the home and pay for the part of the home that is not yours, or you'll have to collectively sell the home regardless of market conditions. So your flexibility is greatly limited when you do own a home. This isn't inherently a bad thing, but it does come with a different level of complication if any type of life change comes your way. And the final reason to consider not buying a home today has to do with opportunity cost. So when you make a decision around a home, we've already gone through the extreme financial burden this can put on you. When you take a large sum of money and invest it in a home, you do not have the flexibility to also use that money in other ways. And so if it has been your goal to purchase a home and have your very own home for a long period of time, that's great as a goal, and it can be a very profound experience to own your own home. That said, there are potentially other ways of investing money that give you much more flexibility, potentially more upside, although that depends greatly. And they don't come with some of the burdens we've discussed today relative to owning a home. I personally feel like the opportunity cost may be worthwhile in purchasing a home, but you have to make sure that that decision aligns with the goals that you've set out for your life. If that decision does not align, then there could be a mismatch at a later point, and you might find yourself stuck, missing out on other opportunities that you would rather pursue. And so think through this very thoroughly. I think buying a home is one of the biggest financial decisions you'll make in your entire life. Home ownership has long been presented as a great investment. I want to challenge you to reconsider that notion. I'm sure many of you have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and understand some of these specifics. Home ownership is not necessarily a good investment. It's not necessarily a bad investment either. It can be either depending on the goals that you have and your expectations, plus how you've prepared yourself for that experience financially. But there are some flip sides to this traditional way of thinking. Home ownership has long been a way of making sure that an individual is taking savings and investing it into an asset that has traditionally increased and appreciated over time. This is a forced saving mechanism. I would challenge you to consider alternatives that require you to simply have the discipline to take that same money and invest it in different ways or save it in an account in different ways. In other words, it's not forced upon you to pay a mortgage, but it is an opportunity space for you to take that same money and invest it in different ways. There are trade-offs to either approach, and clearly we aren't going into depth into some of these alternatives. So there are pros and cons here, but if you do value a more flexible approach, you want to have the flexibility to change locations and to endure lifestyle changes, homeownership is likely not the best decision for you at this point in life. Okay, so this has been a brief overview of my 5 top reasons to consider not buying a home. In a later video, we'll talk about my 5 top reasons to purchase a home and why it might make sense for you. Thanks a lot for listening today. I hope you got some value out of the video, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.